7 people who survived the impossible. Imagine waking up one morning completely unaware that within hours you would face a situation that should have ended your life. Most people never come close to experiencing a true life or death moment, but the people in today's video found themselves in accidents so unbelievable that doctors, rescuers, and witnesses could hardly believe they survived. These are 7 real stories of people who escaped death against impossible odds. Number 7. The truck driver filled with air. Stephen, an experienced truck driver from New Zealand, was performing routine work on his truck. It was a normal day and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. While positioned between the truck's trailer and bumper, he suddenly lost his footing and fell. At first, he expected the usual pain that comes with an accident. Instead, something far stranger happened. Co-workers rushed over and quickly realized he had fallen onto a compressed air valve connected to the truck's braking system. By the time he reached the hospital, doctors saw that the air had spread through much of his body. Thankfully, the medical team stabilized him, and after several days of treatment, he made a full recovery. By the time he reached the hospital, doctors later said that if the injury had been slightly different, the outcome could have been much worse. Number 6. The skydiver saved by ants. Joan was an experienced skydiver who had completed many jumps before. One day, she boarded a plane expecting another routine dive, but when she jumped, things did not go as planned. Her main parachute failed to open. She tried again. Still nothing. With the ground rushing closer, Joan deployed her emergency parachute. Then disaster struck again. The reserve parachute became tangled, and she lost control as she fell. But the story did not end there. Joan had landed directly on a fire ant nest. The ants swarmed her body and stung her many times. Doctors later believed that the intense reaction may have helped keep her heart going long enough for rescuers to reach her. Against all odds, Joan woke from her coma and eventually returned to normal life. Number 5. The woman pulled into a sinking ship. In 1915, Margaret and her husband were traveling across the Atlantic on a luxury ocean liner. Everything seemed calm until a massive explosion shook the ship. A torpedo had struck the vessel. Panic spread quickly as passengers rushed toward the lifeboats. Margaret first got into a lifeboat, but when she saw a huge smokestack looming overhead, she became frightened and climbed back onto the ship. Moments later, the ship went under. As the water churned around her, Margaret was pulled into one of the ship's smokestacks. It seemed impossible that anyone could survive such a situation. Then, in an incredible twist, an explosion deep inside the sinking ship forced air upward and pushed her back to the surface. Rescuers spotted her and pulled her into a lifeboat. When she looked around, she saw that her husband was alive in another boat. Number 4. Swallowed by a whale. Julie and Liz were kayaking near the California coast during a whale feeding event. Large groups of fish had gathered near the surface, attracting humpback whales to the area. Tourists watched from boats and kayaks as the whales moved through the water. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A huge humpback whale suddenly rose beneath the women. Both kayakers found themselves inside the whale's enormous mouth. For a terrifying moment, it seemed that they might be swallowed. Fortunately, humpback whales are not built to eat humans. Their mouths are huge, but their throats are too narrow for a person to pass through. Realizing the kayakers were not food, the whale quickly let them go. Seconds later, both women resurfaced unharmed. What began as a peaceful wildlife outing became one of the most shocking animal encounters ever recorded. Number 3. Crushed by a conveyor belt. Matthew arrived at work expecting a normal day. Instead, he found himself in an accident that seemed impossible to survive. As he walked near a conveyor system, part of his clothing became caught in the machinery. Within seconds, he was pulled into the moving equipment. Co-workers rushed over after hearing his cries for help. The injuries were severe, and doctors later found multiple fractures and serious internal trauma. Many believed he would not make it, but Matthew refused to give up. After long recovery, he slowly regained his strength. 18 months later, he achieved something few thought possible. He returned to work and continued his life. Number 2. The woman who fell from the sky. Vesna was working as a flight attendant on a passenger plane when tragedy struck high above Europe. Without warning, an explosion tore through the aircraft. The plane broke apart in mid-air, sending wreckage falling toward the ground. For anyone on board, survival seemed impossible, but Vesna was trapped in a section of the tail that remained partially intact as it fell. That piece of the aircraft dropped thousands of feet before crashing into a snowy forest. When rescuers later found her, she was still alive. She had survived a fall from more than 30,000 feet. The impact left her with serious injuries and a long recovery ahead, but doctors were stunned that she had survived at all. Over time, Vesna recovered enough to walk again and continue her life. Her story remains one of the most extraordinary survival cases in aviation history. Number 1. The luckiest man alive. Few people escape death once. Frane Selak seemed to escape it again and again. Over several decades, he survived an unbelievable series of accidents. A train crash, a plane accident, a bus falling into a river, several car fires, being hit by a bus, and even a car going off a mountain road. Each event should have ended his life, yet somehow he survived every single one. Then came one of the most incredible twists of all. After repeatedly escaping death, Frane later won a major lottery prize. His story became famous around the world and earned him a nickname many still remember today: the world's luckiest man. These stories remind us how unpredictable life can be. Sometimes survival comes down to quick thinking, sometimes it depends on skilled doctors, and sometimes it comes down to pure luck. One thing is certain, every person on this list faced a moment when survival seemed impossible, yet somehow, against all odds, they lived to tell the tale.